Hi everyone, and welcome to my next video tutorial, which is going to be focused on deploying our Django web applications to an exciting platform known as Seenode. So what I really like about Seenode is the fact that it is very simple and very straightforward to deploying your Django applications. It removes all of the clutter and ensures that everything is smooth and only what you need to get the job done. Right, so we will be deploying our Django web application, and we're also going to utilize a Postgres database as well through Seenode. And we can also see that there are going to be additional services which are coming soon, as we can see here, such as MongoDB, Redis, Workers, Cron, and Docker. So just something to also keep in mind here with the platform itself. Okay, now pricing. Now you are entitled to a 7-day free trial, no credit card required. And in terms of the detailed pricing here, we can see that the rates here, okay, are quite affordable, starting from $1 per month. And as we can see, we can go up in certain tiers here according to the pricing that we have here in the CPUs and the RAM, etc. And that also goes for the database as well. So you can see some more information there as well. Okay, now of course, if you have any questions or anything of the like, we can go ahead and click on the following here. And if you have any questions, of course, you can read through if there's anything that you're wondering, or you can go on ahead and send a message if you want some more information on the site or anything of the sorts, and also on the pricing and the free trial as well for the 7 days. So just a little bit of context for you there. All right, so let's go on ahead and get started. So I want to sign up with GitHub, but I'm going to just go ahead and click on it this way. So I'm going to say sign up for free. Okay, then we can create our account. So you have multiple options available to you, and I am already signed into my GitHub account. So what I'd recommend you do is first of all sign into your GitHub account, and then we can continue with the process of Seenode here. So I'm going to choose GitHub. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and say continue. Okay, and now we need to give Seenode the necessary permissions. So I'm going to scroll down and say authorize Seenode. Okay, so we need to give it the necessary access. Let's just give it a moment. Right, now we need to just add in some information about ourselves. So what are we using Seenode for? And this is going to help to go on ahead and set everything in stone for us. So I'm just going to add in my information here. So it's going to be tailored to everyone. So I'm going to say I'm going to be using it for myself. I'll say freelancer. The main, the primary development language, okay. We can set it to what we are utilizing. So it will be Python in our case, since of course, as you know, Django is a Python-based web framework. And the source here, where we can see it as to where we heard from them. So I'm just going to say other. And then you can give a workspace name here to your team name. So you can go ahead and modify that if you desire. But just make sure that you filled everything out. And now what you can do is go to the platform. Okay, so that's also in turn going to create your account. And there we are. So already it gives us opportunity now to go ahead and create our web service. So what we're going to do is just navigate to database for now. And there we are. So well done on creating your Seenode account. All right, so we've got that all in place and we are ready to continue. Right, so let's continue. So now what we want to do is go on ahead and create our first database. Okay, and we need to choose the type and version. So we're going to utilize Postgres. And then the version here, I'm going to set to 16. Then we can choose the packages that fit our requirements. I want to choose the $1 per month. And as you can see, they will have certain stipulations here in terms of storage, vCPUs, and the process at hand. Now you want to specify your database name. So I'm going to set this as production database 1. Right, now I can go ahead and create this database. We can see some information here that's been set in terms of the database summary, the hardware, and all of that. So let's go ahead and create that database. Right, so our database has been created and it is just being deployed. So we just need to be a little bit patient here. And there we go, all the nodes are running. So I'm just going to zoom in again, and there we go. Right, so we can see some more information here in terms of the performance, some details here, and the metrics. So remember, when you're looking at metrics, usually it does take some time until it generates some data. And connection and users, where we can connect to our database. Now, what I really like is that it has a drop down that eases how you can connect to your Postgres database. So for example, under connection parameters, this is the standard way to set up your database. For example, in Django, you would just have the database, username, password, host, and port that you would need to define. Now you can also swap this out for URI, and that is also very helpful. So it's essentially just one standard URI that you utilize here. And all you need to do is you just go on ahead and plug that in, and you could typically utilize a library known as DJ database, DJ Django database URL, I believe it is, or something of the sort. And anyway, that allows you to utilize the URI that you can just put in one single string, and that really helps to make the whole process a lot faster. So there's many ways in which you can essentially go ahead and do it. So it's DJ database URL, I believe it's called. Anyway, let's go on ahead and continue. So I'm going to use connection parameters to keep things quite standardized and simple. And what we want to do now is we want to head on over to the Django application that we actually want to deploy and set this production database for. So I have a sample application here up and running, and I want to deploy this to Seenode. So make sure that you have that in hand. And then what I'm going to do is navigate to said project settings.py file. And I'm going to scroll down. And here, as we can see, the default database here in place is an SQLite database. We just want to now comment this out just for now. And we're going to instead use our Postgres database instead. Now it's going to inherit some familiar settings like we have here set out for SQLite. But before we can utilize a Postgres database, we need to install the library so that we can connect our Django application to a Postgres database. So we need like a Python adapter, you could say. Now, there is a library known as psychopg2 binary, which is going to allow you to connect according to this Python Postgres database adapter, and that's what we need. So we can copy that, navigate to our terminal, and you just want to say pip install psychopg2 binary, and that's going to install the necessary library. Okay, there we go, it's been installed. Okay. Right, now we can design this markup here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on ahead and copy this structure that we need for Postgres. Now the engine is going to be different. That's the first thing that's going to be different from what we have been essentially working with. So SQLite 3 is going to be Postgres SQL. Okay, that's going to be the engine that we're utilizing, because remember, if you look here at Seenode, we are using a Postgres database. That is what we are utilizing. Okay, now for the name, what I'm going to do is just set this in empty strings while I define all of the key and values. So we're going to have user would be next, so that would be the username typically. Then we will have a password. Now don't worry, we are going to secure everything when we deploy with environment variables. Then we're going to have host. Okay, and then we're going to have port as well. Right, so do keep that in mind here. This is what we essentially are going to have. Now let's go back to Seenode. So here we can see our connection parameters here. So all we're going to want to do is go ahead and add it in. So the database is essentially the database name. So you can copy your necessary value, and here you'll put it next to name. Then we'll have user, and that's subsequently the same as the username. So we can copy that and apply that. Then you're going to want to move to the password, and the password here, we can just say show temporarily. Copy, and make sure you copy the whole one. There we go, we can copy that. Paste it in. Just want to remove any spaces. Make sure you have no spaces when you copy the value in. Then we want to have the host. So we can copy that host. That is essentially the endpoint for our database. And then the port here, we can just go ahead and copy and paste that port in. All right, there we go. So here are all the base configuration settings in for integrating a Postgres database externally from a cloud service provider. And specifically, this will be for Seenode. Now, what you can do is open your command prompt. And what you want to do is just run your server. Just do a simple test. So I'm going to say python manage.py run server. Okay. All right. And there we go. So if you see the message that says you have a specific number, should I say, of unapplied migrations, this is what you want to see. This part here, that's going to indicate that you have successfully connected, in this case, to your Seenode Postgres database. Okay, so that's just like a verification to see if there's any connection issues or anything of the like. This means that your application, your Django application, has successfully been connected. Now we can stop the server. So we can just say Control-C. And now you want to say python manage.py to migrate all of your database files accordingly to your recently connected database. So we can just run that, and that's going to migrate all the default database files of your application, such as all of your default Django apps and such. So all we need to do now is be a bit patient, and then we'll continue once that has been set into place. All right, so welcome back. So as we can see, everything was migrated. And we are good to go. So well done. Right, perfect. So we've got that set. Now what I would recommend you do is to create a soup user so that we'll be able to access our soup user once we've deployed our application. So what you can do is just head on over to your terminal again, and you can run python manage.py create super user. Okay, I'm just going to say Arno-admin. Skip the email, enter in a password to access your admin, and again. And there we go. Perfect. Right, so we have that now in place as it should be. All right, perfect. Well done. Now that we have our database integrated, we now need to go on ahead and install a few imported packages. Now let's head on back, and we want to, first of all, install Gunicorn or Gunicorn. Now this is essentially a WSGI HTTP server for Unix, and the reason that we're going to require it is because it's going to act as sort of an interface in order to allow our Django application to communicate with the web servers of Seenode. All right. And this applies generally for any hosting platform that you're utilizing it with. You're most likely going to need Gunicorn as the intermediary between the two. Okay, so we can go ahead and copy Gunicorn, and we can just say install, pip install Gunicorn. Okay. Right, there we go. Perfect. Next, we need to go ahead and install white noise. Now, white noise is going to allow us to serve our static files, so our CSS, our JavaScript files, etc. So we're going to need to install this as well. And we can just say pip install white noise. So you want to make sure that's also in place. All right, perfect. Great. All right, so we've got that set up as well. Perfect. Now, what we can do is head on back to our settings.py, and we're now going to essentially prepare for deployment. Now, this is going to follow a lot of steps, such as configuring our static files, and also generate our requirements.txt files, setting debug to false, and all of that. So let's keep this rather simple and start off with static files. Right, so the first thing that I want to go over with you in terms of static files is you need to make sure that you actually have a static folder that you're working with for your static files. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and close that settings.py file for now. And in your directory here, if we take a look, you can see here that I have a static directory, and I have a simple styles.css file and an app.js file as well. Now, what we're going to need to do is essentially house everything in a static files directory, which is going to be static root. And this is also going to include all of the behind the scenes files that stem also from the Django admin. And we want to just ensure that everything's in place so that we can serve it in production. All right, so that is what we want to go on ahead and work with. Now, before we can do that, we need to define our static root. So remember, have your static files ready. Then we can go to our settings.py. Okay, and we can navigate to where static is. So here I have static URL set accordingly, and static files dir is here just to ensure I have the correct location set up for my static files. So we need to define static underscore root. And what I always like to do is utilize the OS module to help me to join the base directory with my static files directory. So I'm just telling Django the location as to where my static files are going to be situated along with my Django admin files, etc. So you could kind of see it as the static files for production, or preparing it for production. That's how I would like to interpret it best. So what I'd recommend you do is to import the OS module, and we're also going to use this to handle our environment variables as well. So do keep that in mind. So I like to import it right at the top and say import OS. And what you can do here by static root is you can just say os.pass.join. And here in parentheses, you'll put in base underscore dir, comma, and then you're going to give a new file name here, and I'll call this static file. So we need to ensure we have this so we can handle our static files in production. Very important that you have that in place. All right, so we've got that now defined. And the next thing that we're going to want to go ahead and do is we're going to want to go ahead and set up white noise. Okay, and that's going to further assist us with our static files. So you can have a look here at the docs, which I'll also be sure to share in the description of this video. And what we're going to want to do is to enable white noise. Now, the first thing that you need to do to enable it is you need to add in the white noise middleware, and you're going to want to place it just below your security middleware in Django. So if I were to zoom in here a tad bit, you can see here we have white noise.middleware, and this is below the security middleware. So you can copy the following and navigate to middleware. Here we are, and we can see we have security middleware. So right below that, you want to go ahead and add it in just like that. So that is how you would go ahead and enable white noise within your Django application. The next thing we need to do is we want to add in some support here in terms of compression and caching. So if we go back, we can scroll down, and this is what we need here to compress our files and hash them so they have unique names. So this means that our files are going to be safely cached forever. So this is going to ensure that you don't have any issues down the line where your static files have been updated, but they haven't been, how can I say, properly compressed and cached. Now, the issue that will occur if you don't do this is you will have, for example, some users that have the latest static files loaded on your website, and other users are going to see older files. Now, by adding in this compression and caching support, it's going to help to ensure that it's going to force your browser to constantly load the latest version and not to cache a specific version for a specific user after a certain amount of time for however long. Okay, so we can go ahead and copy that as is. And I'm just going to paste it right down here. You just want to remove that comment that they add in right there. Okay, and this is bounded to static files. That's also the name of where we've defined static root. So again, with static root here, it's going to tell Django, hey, look in the base directory and create my static files directory and house all of my static files, including the custom ones that I've defined in static, which I showed on earlier when we were taking a look. So make sure that you have that in place there. It's very important that you do. And the next thing we're going to do is just to run python-manage.py collect static. So we want to collect all of the files in that directory. So we can head on over to our terminal and let's go ahead and do just that. All right. So you can say python-manage.py collect static, and that's going to collect all of our static files, and it's going to do so according to what we've defined in static root, and it's going to set it for us accordingly. And we can run that command. Okay. just take a moment here. So sometimes it does take a while, and there we go. So we can see our static files have been copied accordingly. So we can see, there we go, that's right, that's how it should be. So now if we navigate to our directory now, we can now see that we have static files here set. And if I were to just zoom in so you can see here, we can now see that we also have static files.json. And this is a very important file to have here. That's going to ensure that in production that our static files are compressed and caching is supported. And I'm also going to talk a little bit more about caching later on so you can see what I mean. But we can see that's all been set up. Now your custom files that you had previously in static is also added in and also compressed for you as well, along with all of those heavy files that come from the majority, in this case from my Django admin's backend. Okay, so that's how you can handle your static files. Okay, so let's move on to what's next. Let's go to settings. And now what we want to do is go ahead and configure the rest of the details. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is just set a few settings up here. So for debug, okay, let's just turn off our server. Yeah, our server is turned off, so make sure you turn it off. For debug, we want to go ahead and set this as false. Oh, excuse me, false, not the caps. And then in allowed hosts, you want it to be for all hosts for the meantime. We are going to change this once we get issued a default domain name from Seenode, so we are going to get back to this, so don't worry about that. So you got that set. Then what you want to do is you want to go on ahead and ensure that you're setting your CSRF trusted origin. Now, this is just going to ensure that we can make our post requests securely on HTTPS from any domain or the domain that we set. So let's go ahead and set that up. So it will be CSRF underscore trusted underscore origins equals. And we're going to put in the HTTPS scheme of our domain name within this trusted origins so that we can make the requests efficiently. Okay, so for the time being, we can go ahead and comment this out and do that. Okay, and the reason for that is we're not going to have a domain here to work with just of yet. Okay, right. So the next thing that we're going to do before we configure our environment variables is we need to set up our requirements.txt file, and that's going to house all of our packages and all of our dependencies. So what you can do is in your command prompt, you can just say pip freeze greater than requirements.txt, and that's going to create a requirements.txt file for you, and you can go ahead and see that it has in fact been created right here in our base directory. So you want to make sure that you have this requirements.txt file here active. All right, and that's going to house the packages that we're utilizing. So you can see here, this is what I'm utilizing in my current case. It's going to differ for everyone, but this is what we'll be utilizing. Very important that you at least have gunicorn and psychopg binary for your database. These are very important, and of course it goes without saying Django and white noise, and the rest is just sub packages that come along out of the box with Django itself. All right, so just keep that in mind. All right, so we've got that set. Now what we can do is continue, and now we're going to focus on configuring our environment variables. All right, so let's get started. Now there are many ways in which you can configure and set your environment variables. I'm just going to show you one way of doing it, and there are many ways you can do it. So first we look at what is sensitive in our application. So here I can see, okay, my secret key, that's sensitive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on ahead and copy this line of code right here. And I'm just going to paste it in a notepad file on my computer. Now what we need to do is remove the value from our Django application, and we can, with the OS module, we can just say os.environ.get, and here in parentheses you want to put in the name of the environment variable, which you will define within your cloud provider. So in Seenode, I will define a secret key environment variable called secret_key, and this is what you're going to define at that level. Okay, and then when we set up our environment variables, we're just going to collect the value and paste it directly in so that it will be set up. All right, so that is the key way of defining environment variables. Now let's go ahead and set it up for everything else. Okay. Okay, so here we have name, user, password, and host. So we're going to set everything up now for the next set. Okay, so what you're going to want to do now is set it for your name here. So the name of your database. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this here. Okay, so that will be my database name. Okay, and we're just going to remove this, and we're going to say os.environ.get, and within parentheses, I will call this name. Then we're going to have the user. Okay, that's of course going to have the same name as well, but that's fine. And I'm going to remove what's in quotes here and say os.environ.get user. Then I'll have password. Okay, so I want to copy the password first. And then put the rest in. I'll just say word. Okay, I just wanted to make a habit of copying this here. Okay, so we can remove that. Say os.environ.get password. That's what I'm going to define in render. And then we have the host and the port as well, which you can also go ahead and set up as well. So I'll also do it for the host. Okay. Go. And the host too. All right, perfect. So we've got that also secured. All right, so make sure you save this, okay, and just keep it somewhere safe. So we're going to utilize it soon enough. So we've got that set up. So we've got host, password, name, and user. So the sensitive information we've got set in place. Right, so we've got that all done. Now, the next thing that we're going to go on ahead and focus upon is downloading and installing Git, so we can have a nice workflow to push our source code to GitHub with Git, of course. All right, so make sure you define your environment variables. Now, if your application has other sensitive information, okay, go ahead and secure them with the environment variables as well, and just do what I did and apply with what I showed you. So let's just do a once over. So we've got that set, name, user, password, host, and database false, secret key. Okay, that's good. I think we got everything right. All right, great. So we've got that all into place, and now what we can do is go ahead and install Git. So you can head on to the following site here, which is at git-scm.com. I will put the link in the description, and you want to navigate to this site. Then what you want to do is download it for your operating system. Now, if you are on macOS, it will automatically detect here that you're using macOS, and you can say download from macOS. Same thing with Windows. If you're using Windows and you navigate to this site, it will automatically pick up that you're utilizing Windows. So we can say download for Windows, and you want to choose the necessary setup installer. So I'm going to choose a 64-bit for Windows setup. Right. So we can choose the following option. Okay, it's going to download it. Okay, we can open up the setup wizard. Okay, and then your screen is going to dim. You just want to say yes to the changes message for security. And then it's going to prompt open the setup wizard now. So we can just go ahead and say install. Okay, and if you have any previous versions, it will go ahead and remove that for you and just go ahead and continue. So what I want to do here is just wait for Git to remove the old versions and then to install it on my system. So let's just give it a moment to do so. All right, so welcome back. So we can see Git was installed. Now what you can do is just uncheck view release notes unless you want to see the release notes. You can click here on the check box here and say launch git bash and then say finish. And that's going to open it up for you here, as we can see. Right, there we go. So that is how you can go ahead and set up Git on your machine. Now the next stage is going to be focused on pushing our application to GitHub with Git. Okay, so we can go ahead and minimize the following and head on back. Okay, so we've got that all configured now. What we can do is head on over to GitHub. All right, and let's go ahead and push our application to GitHub with Git. Right, so let's first of all create our repository. So I'm going to say create repository. Then we can give our repository a name. I'll call mine dev. I'll add in a sample description. I'll just say sample application. We want to keep this private. We can add a README and we can create this repository. Right, there we go, our repository was created. Perfect. Now what I want to do is head on back to Seenode, and we have our database here as we can see. Let's go to web. Okay, we can just close this section here. Okay, we just want to stay on this page for now. Let's go back to GitHub. Okay, now time for pushing to GitHub our source code. Now, before we go ahead and do so, there's something I want to mention, which is going to be important later on, not now. And that is to look for your WSGI application here. So as you can see here, we have crm.wsgi.application. Now what I want you to do is to copy that and just paste it somewhere in your notepad file, because we're going to refer to this. And this is the path that we need to set with Gunicorn so that that interface can be linked between Django and Seenode. And we specifically need this part here. And the reasoning I'll dive into in just a moment. All right, so we've got that set now. Okay, so I think we're ready to get everything deployed. So what I'm going to do now is open up Git bash here, and we can say clear. And there we go, start fresh. And we want to look for where our project is stored. So we can see that the project here, if we close settings here, we can see that it is within project CRM, and that is on my desktop. Okay, so project CRM is on my desktop, and then I have CRM here, which is where my Django project is, along with the requirements.txt file, static files, my custom Django app, etc. And this is on my desktop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my Git bash terminal, and we want to say cd desktop first. And that's going to go to the desktop. Okay, and this is where my folder project CRM is. So if I were to minimize everything, okay, you can see here that project CRM is on my desktop. Okay, so now what I can do is head on back and ensure I'm on the desktop, which I am, cd desktop. Now I want to go into project-CRM. So I can say cd project-CRM. Then cd CRM, which is my Django project. And this is going to be the directory that I want to initialize all of my files within. So I can say git init to initialize the Git repository. Then I want to add all of my files. So I can say git add, just like that. Okay, so it's going to be a lot of files that you're going to want to add. So make sure you've added them. And then what we want to do is close this up, and you can say git commit -m. So now we're going to commit all of our files, and I'll set this as first deploy. Okay, there we go. Close this up. Now we just want to change our branch here. So from the master branch, we want it to be the main branch. And the reason for that is we are going to be utilizing the main branch here in our GitHub repository. So you can just say git branch -m main. So we're going to switch to the main branch. Perfect. Okay, now that we have gone ahead and done that, we need to go ahead and add our origin for our repository. So to do so, you would need to say git remote add origin. And then you need to go to the URL of where your repository is. You can go ahead and copy it. Then you can go ahead and right click and paste that in. And then you want to add .git right at the end there. Okay, so that's going to add your origin for you. There we go. So we've got that done. Now we can move on to the last part. Okay, and that is going to that's going to involve pushing our GitHub files. So that's the next thing that we want to do. Right, so we can say git push -u origin main onto the main branch -- force to ensure that it pushes it. And you want to run that command. Okay, let's just be a bit patient here. Okay, and then we're going to have the Git credential manager open up. And you have the opportunity to decide how you want to sign in with GitHub. So we want to say sign in with browser since we're already signed in. So we can go ahead and choose that option. Okay, we can see there that the authentication succeeded. So we can close the tab here and head on back to git bash. And here we can see everything has been pushed to the main branch. So we can now check that out if that's for real. We can refresh our repository. And there we go. We can see we've pushed all of our files successfully to GitHub. All right, so there you have it. So well done on getting to this point, on pushing your application to GitHub with Git. All right, so we've got that set. So well done. All right, so let's continue. We can now head on to Seenode, and you want to create your first web service. So let's go ahead and click on that. Then with either GitHub or GitLab, depending on what you're utilizing, we can connect to our existing repository. So what I want to say now is configure account, because you can see we need to configure first so that we can access our repository. So we can choose that option. Okay, and we want to then install Seenode. Now you can decide if you want to install it for all repositories or select repositories and then select a repository. It's really up to you as to what you want to do. So I'm just going to say all, and you can say install. Okay, you can see everything has been set up, and we can now close this window. Right, now we can click here on the repository menu, and what you're going to want to do is to refresh. And now if you go and select repository, you'll now see that you'll be able to select your repository. All right, great. So let's continue the process. Okay, so important information here. So I'm going to zoom in here. Okay, so let's see. Creating web service from our specified repository. It's going to be on the main branch since that's where our code is currently situated. We're going to deploy the first commit, which of course was first deploy the image here. Okay, you can decide what Python version you want to utilize. So I'm going to utilize 3.12. Okay, our build command is set here in terms of the build and deploy settings. So we want to install everything in our requirements.txt file. And we're also going to want to set a start command. So remember, like I said, in order for Django to communicate with Seenode, we need to have gunicorn as an interface, and this is quite standard. So if you've used even render before, you will have seen this before. So what we can do is remove that, and we're going to say gunicorn or gunicorn, okay? And then you want to refer to what is your path here. So we can see the WSGI application is at CRM in my case. So you want to go ahead and add in what it is for you. And that's essentially your project name usually for Django. So I'm going to then go ahead and put in CRM.WSGI:application. Then you want to ensure that you bind it to the port, which Seenode will listen to, which is going to be on port 80. So you can go ahead and say -- bind. Okay, so you won't explicitly see the two dashes, so you're going to have to play it by ear here. So 1 dash, 2 dash. Okay, then you will say bind. And then we're going to ensure that it's going to be on port 80, so we can say at 0.0.0 at, mapping it to port 80. Okay, so let's have a look. So gunicorn is going to run the gunicorn application server. Then we have here CRM.WSGI mapped to the application. So that's going to point to our Django project's WSGI application. And then here, the binding protocol here, we're going to make the app listen on port 80 as required by Seenode. All right. Now, this is not going to work unless you have gunicorn in your requirements.txt file. So remember, you need to make sure that that exists, and please also make sure your requirements.txt file also exists. Now, you can confirm this by looking in your repository and go to your requirements.txt file. So you want to make sure that you have gunicorn in place. Very important. Okay, so there is a little bit more clarity on the process of gunicorn. Okay, got that set. So our root directory will run at the default root, port 80. All right, environment variables time. So we can see here, this is the format. We're going to put in the environment variable followed by the value by saying equals. Now remember, you don't need to put in the strings itself, but let me go ahead and explain the rest of what we had before. So if we go to our project, let's go to our settings.py file. Now you'll see here, for example, that I have defined the environment variable as secret_key. So whatever you put in the parentheses here is what you're going to essentially put right here. That's what you're referring to. So we are saying, okay, the secret_key is going to be equals, and that's going to be equals to the secret key that's defined here within my string. So I can copy what's in the strings and paste it like that. Okay, that's how you would go ahead and set them up. Okay, now you could technically see the environment variable here, what you set in Seenode, and it's kind of a value that you substitute for the value that you are setting it to, which we saved. Okay, so that is how I want you to see it. Right, so let's go ahead and set it for everything else. So our database here, so name, user, password, and host. Then we can go enter, name, that's our database name. Make sure you don't have any trailing spaces or anything, because you can also get an error if you do that. Okay, so remember it was in the quotes. That's name, user, password. Okay, and we have a host. And we can copy that. There we go. So there are environment variables. Okay, so they're now all set. We can then go ahead and say continue. Okay, so we can see here the type that we're going to utilize. So we can select the instance tier. I'm going to use tier 1 and say create instance. Okay, I'm also going to zoom out a tad bit. So there we go, our instance is being deployed. And we can see here the log as well, which we can also expand. So we can expand that so we can see more information in terms of the logs that we are getting. All right, so is this going to take a moment? So all we need to do now is just be a little bit patient, and then we can go ahead and continue. Okay, so there you'll see it greater. I'm just zoomed in a lot. So you can see it's now using Python. It's running the build command to install our packages. It's now it got the commit earlier on. It's using Python 3.12, and you're going to see it will be deployed. So you can just have a look here and read the logs here as everything gets set up and ran. All right, so all we need to do now is be patient as our application is being deployed. All right, so welcome back. So after some time, we can now see that our application has been deployed. We can see here also in the logs, so the deployment was successful, and we can also expand that just to give us a little bit more clarity here in terms of the processes and such. All right, perfect. Now you can access your application by following the URL down below. If it is not available here straight away, what you can do is navigate to domains. And then here you can see is your issued domain for this application that you have just set up. So you can right click and open it. And as you can see, SSL has been added to it automatically. And there we go. So well done. That is how you can deploy your Django web application onto Seenode. Great job. All right, so there we have it. Now, the last things that we're going to do is we need to ensure that we have set up our CSRF trusted origin to make post requests. If we don't do that, our post requests are going to fail. And we also want to test our application, test some post requests, and check out everything is from there. Okay, so first thing is first. I want us to head on back here. Okay, and we need to make a bit of an adjustment. Now you can either do this adjustment in your code itself and push the code to Seenode and then to deploy a specific commit, so your latest commit, or you can go ahead and in your GitHub you can make the changes directly there. So the choice is yours how you want to do it. So I'm going to do it the regular way. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to obtain that URL. So here is our default URL right here, and we want to copy this. And we want to go to our settings.py file, and let's navigate now to our, let's see, allowed hosts. There we are. And you want to go ahead and paste in that URL, and you can just remove the / at the end, and you can remove the HTTPS scheme. Okay, so if you zoom out, this is what you should have. You just want to add in the domain name to your allowed host so that you don't have all hosts connecting to your Django application. You just want that particular URL. Okay, domain name, should I say. And then the CSRF trusted origin. Okay, what you want to do is you want to go ahead and paste it as follows, but you want to make sure that you remove at the end the /. This is very important, or else this CSRF trusted origin isn't going to work. So essentially this line of code here is going to say that this is a trusted origin and that you can essentially make post requests on this website accordingly. So remember, you need to include the HTTPS scheme here, and you need to ensure that you don't have a / at the end. And as for the allowed host, you just want the raw domain name.com. So mydomainname.com, for example. So that's just something very important to remember. So we want to make those changes. And you want to go to git bash. And we're going to do the same again. So you want to say git add. Okay. And the next thing you want to do is you want to go on ahead and ensure that you commit this. So you can say git commit -m second deploy. Okay, one file changed. And what I want to look for now is we want to push. Yeah, we want to push now. So git push. There we go. That's been pushed. Now what we can do is head on to GitHub. Let's just refresh. Okay, so we should see now second deploy. Let's go in and just double check that that has actually been changed in settings.py. It has been, it says, but here you should see your allowed hosts and CSRF trusted origin should have been set. Okay, very important. Now what you can do is you can navigate back to Seenode, and here under this deploy button, let's just zoom in. What you can do is click on that, and you want to deploy a specific commit. Okay. Just give it a moment to load up. And here it's going to automatically choose the latest commit here, but you can explicitly check it and you want to say deploy. Okay, that's going to redeploy the application here. So you can see it has been triggered. So let's just give it a moment to redeploy everything and then we'll continue. All right, welcome back. So we can see the deployment was a success again. So let's go ahead and we can just refresh our application, but for good measure, we can just go ahead and click on the link. And there we go. Right, so what I'm going to do now is test the application. The first thing that I want to do, most importantly, is check our post request. So let's go to the admin. So you can say /admin. And here you can see that our static files have been collected. So a typical check if your static files weren't collected correctly is your Django admin will lose its starting. It's kind of a typical phenomenon, but this is a good way to see that it hasn't. And just to show you while we're at it, you can right click and say view page source. And here you can see that it's serving our static files that we have set up. And you can see here that it has this number straight after it. So it's like a hashed sort of code, you could say. So these are like hashed indexes, and this essentially means that our CSS files are going to be compressed and that they're not going to be cached at any time by any browser that you're utilizing. So this means that your browser is going to be forced to load the latest static files that your application uses and that it won't cache them. So it's very useful and very important. And this is going to be widespread for your application. Now, if I were to go to, my register page, right click and say view page source, it's also going to apply that to my custom, for example, CSS and JavaScript files as well. So just a little bit on caching there. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. Let's go to the admin and let's go ahead and log in. Right, so we can see that the details were entered in. So let's go on ahead and log in. And there we go. So here is our Django admin, and we can go to users, and this is just a test to actually see our Django admin user. So we just want to go ahead and check, and there we have it, Arno-admin. Perfect. So that was that super user that we created as we were setting up our database. So now what we can do is head on over and test the application. So let's test a post request. So I'm going to say register, and on my application, I'm just going to say test user 1, enter a password, confirm it, create the account, and that should redirect me to my login page. All right, so there we go. So redirected us to our login page, and there we have it. So our post requests are working perfectly fine. Okay, so the last thing that I'll mention is, let's say you want to set up a custom domain name. You can go ahead and click on domains, and here you can see we have a set default domain. And what you can also do is go ahead and add your own domain as well. If that's something you want to look into, you can of course refer to it as well. Okay, so we can see that is the way to set it up. And the last thing I want to mention is how you can delete your resources. So if you want to delete this web service, you can go to settings and you would scroll down, and then you will go ahead and delete this service. If you want to delete your database, okay, what you can do is go ahead and click on your database itself, and you would need to go to the settings here. These you'll see these 3 dots, and then you would say delete, and that's how you would go on and follow the process of deleting your database. All right, guys, so that is essentially it for this video tutorial. And as always, thank you for the support, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.